Before I get into my thoughts, I want to give you a chance to tell us what you thought of the wild Cup finish that we saw between Chris Buescher and Shane Van Gisbergen, as well as the Xfinity Series finish where I guess Connor Zilisch pulled a Joey Logano at Nashville. Nobody thought that any of those top three were going to have enough fuel, and yet he not only won and made it across the line, but he did so in dominant fashion.
Yeah, first Connor Zilisch, man, made a dominant statement on the Xfinity field, and it was actually kind of embarrassing for how long it took to get the overtime taken care of, and also, frankly, pretty embarrassing for the rest of the field behind Connor that was swerving out left and right off the track, going three wide around the entire circuit. It was pretty awkward, and of course, yeah, you're fighting for every position, and then seeing Sheldon Creed at the end after it was all said and done, and knowing yet again he is not yet at his win, and yeah, you can't pass under yellow. It's already said and done. Man, the Cup Series race though, that was uh, like you said, that is a definition of overtime working well. Of course, I also rolled my eyes when we went into overtime for the Cup race at Watkins Glen, but we I think we were rewarded for it this time, just because we have some talent that was there at the front. Chris Buescher and Shane Van Gisbergen, who SVG also a big part of the Xfinity race as well. It's to be expected, but man, the Cup race gave us something really special. And never did I think I would see, this is the most important part to me. Never did I think I would see someone be able to pass in the carousel for the win. Um, all the other big moments at Watkins Glen that I can remember anyway. This is without prep. That big moments at Watkins Glen. You might prove me wrong, but they didn't seem to happen in the carousel. A lot were set up in the carousel. They got a guy loose in the carousel, but carousel is historically, from my memory, something that a place on the track where you have to kind of methodically set up your next move that you're going to get on that back straight going into 6 and 7, or maybe you just the after effects of what you already completed on the bus stop. So yeah, that it was. It almost didn't seem real. It almost had like a Ross Chastain moment for me. Like, did he really just do that? Like the camera it was doing that. Was on the zip line thing through the bus stop, which I think looks incredible. Great job, NBC. Um, but like coming into the carousel, the angle we had was on the tails of the cars, and so it didn't look real for a moment. But man, that was a sweet move, and Chris Buescher finally gets that chip off his shoulder and gets a win on a road course. Nicely done, and for the Cat in the Hat too, getting to celebrate.
Yeah, well, and Lee Diffie mentioned it on the call. Even before what happened, there were shades of Keselowski and Ambrose, of course. Brad
Right?
Keselowski, part
Yeah.
owner of the RFK car that Chris Buescher was driving, and Buescher doing what Keselowski wasn't able to do, and that was taking the fight to the guy from down under, Marcus Ambrose from Australia, obviously Shane Van Gisbergen from New Zealand, but still very much part of that supercars world. And very rare mistake out of a driver of number 16. Colleague racing / like a lot of Trackhouse influence Chevrolet there. Would have been cool to see that car win. Unfortunately, we're in the playoffs now, so it wouldn't have had an effect on the owners' playoffs and throwing a wrench into that. But still would have been
Had
good
an
for
effect on us. So it would have been a really cool win.
Yeah, would have been great for SVG. And it still was great for SVG. Yeah, a great weekend for him overall. Top fives in both races, and in contention for the win on the Cup side of things. I think you have to say he's probably going to be a playoff lock. He's probably going to win one of these races next year if he drives the way he did yesterday. So we'll keep our eye on that. But I do want to talk about the overtime debate here, because obviously it came up again, and there was one individual who I'm not going to name here, but he and I, if you know, he and I have gone back and forth on this on X/Twitter before, namely after last year's Indy 500. And sent a tweet out with an eye rolling emoji saying sarcastically, "Well, I don't know, guys. I think we should have sacrificed that great finish to end it under caution." And so, I saw that. I didn't respond to the tweet, but I tweeted myself because Charlie Krull tweeted that he likes the idea of unlimited overtime. Said no matter how many tries it takes, we should do our best to try to get something like what we saw on the Cup Series side of things with that incredible finish. And in light of all that, I will acknowledge, and I said on the year here after, I think it was Nashville, whenever we had the quintuple overtime, that couldn't believe Mike Bagley's poll that he put out that it was like 4%. Somebody that or people that wanted no overtimes was 4%. People that wanted 4 or more was still 73%, or some ridiculously high number like that. So shows that I'm in the minority, and I'll acknowledge that. So this is my proposal that I'm coming to the table with, and I've proposed it before, but I want to add another element to it this week because of the title of the race. We'll give you one attempt. I'll admit it. What we saw yesterday was absolutely fantastic, and yeah, way more entertaining and way more satisfying of a finish than just ending it under caution. But Brandon, you know what the race title was yesterday?
Well, I can help you on that. It was the Go Bowling at the Glen. Oh, you mean the Xfinity race?
The Cup. Well, either one.
Oh,
either one. What's the Xfinity? Well, actually, we can't do it with the Xfinity race.
That would be that would be the Mission 200.
But
so
yes,
200.
But the Cup Series race was the Go Bowling at the Glen.
Sure was.
What race do we have coming up this week? It's Bristol Night race, right?
Mm-hmm. No number attached to it.
No number
Miles
attached
or laps.
And that's that. And listen, I'm sure people are rolling their eyes right now. They're going to say that that's silly on my part. But I'm sorry. I'm a firm believer that words and numbers mean something. Numbers are not arbitrary. You go to the Daytona 500, you plan for a 500-mile race, and when you have overtime after overtime after overtime, and Kyle Busch takes the checkered flag at lap number 500, but he's not the winner, it bothers me on a fundamental level that that's what we do here. We got to take the numbers out of the races if we're going to do this. So, but on a weekend like this, hey, it's the Go Bowling at the Glen. It's a race. You want to have these rules where you have to get a green flag finish? Again, I'd rather see us limited to one attempt, but it doesn't bother me as much this weekend. It's just called the Go Bowling at the Glen.
And those that are radically in favor of overtimes at all costs, they love the Go Bowling at the Glen. They love the fact that it has no number, and they use that as a talking point.
Yeah, and again, Brandon, I don't know if you saw it. I know our colleague here at Grid Network, frequent guest on our shows, Jonathan Field. I said as the Xfinity finish was going on, man, this just feels like a lottery because all these guys, these crew chiefs, they planned to save this much fuel, and now the race keeps getting extended. Nobody knows where it's going to end. And I shouldn't have used that word lottery because lottery implies completely random and no order or anything whatsoever. So poor choice of words on my part. I'm sure I've tweeted that in the past.
Not completely a lottery.
It's a good reminder for me to be a little bit more articulate and careful with my vocabulary here, as somebody that values the definition of words and the meaning of numbers, as I just laid out here during this argument. It's not a lottery, but it is very difficult to predict, and it makes the crew chief's job a lot harder. Overtime itself makes a crew chief's job harder. We saw it. We've seen it plenty of times. Where drivers think they're good on fuel, and then we get an overtime. But when it goes into 3 or 4, as we saw at Nashville, 5 attempts, it completely, drivers are going to start running out of fuel because these cars don't have an infinite number of space in their fuel cells, right? Like it makes it, I don't know. Even if we do get a green flag finish at the end, and by the way, thank goodness Connor Zilic did win this race. He was thoroughly deserving of it. He had to come back from the penalty that sent him to the back of the field and was so fast, so dominant all day long. So it turned out all right, and I can't really complain about that. But it just when it goes on for almost an hour, and I saw IMSA fans on social media saying this, like, imagine if the 6 hours of the Glen turned into the 7 hours of the Glen because they had to get a green flag finish and they couldn't finish it. People look at that and say these are the so-called best stock car drivers in the world. And it takes you an hour to run 2 laps. You can't run 2 green flag laps. So I don't know if that's, again, I know it doesn't happen every time. It clearly didn't happen in the Cup race this weekend. They were well enough behaved to give us a good finish there. But I don't know. I feel like you leave the door open for unlimited attempts. You leave the door open for something like what we saw at Nashville this year and what we saw in Xfinity this weekend to happen.
Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know if I cut you off there. If you want to follow up on that,
no, I was cutting you off. So I'm glad you kept going. I was saying in the Cup race they did not behave themselves beforehand. That's why we were in the overtime situation. But
Yeah,
some way they were able to keep it clean, well, enough to where we didn't have to throw a yellow. But I think back to William Byron falling onto Brad Keselowski's number 6 machine. That was very scary. Glad
yeah.
he's okay there on that driver's side, of course. But yeah, that the whole combination of things turning into overtime there. Yeah, I'm still just kind of in the same camp with you. Where yes, in a way, they are being put in a box to do these sorts of things, but also the rule. I gotta also look at that. The rules are this way from the very beginning of the season. Yes, the fuel cells hold this much, but also they know going in that this is going to be a possibility, and
Sure.
they know the probability of it's more possible here, less possible here. They account for that, and they don't blame the system if they are out for the count when it happens. They say, well, we fell on the short end of the stick this time.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's completely fair as well. The rules are the same for everybody. Everybody has to be able to adapt to it, and whoever ultimately can adapt to it the best is going to come out on top. And again, I think it speaks very highly of Connor Zilisch, not only how dominant he was, but how he was able to save as much fuel as he did. I mean, just everything got thrown at him with the penalty early on. Rookie mistake following those 2 cars through the bus stop. I still have no idea what happened there. I can understand Zilich's frustration there. I can understand the confusion, but I don't understand the confusion as to why it was a penalty. But hey, he drove back through the field and outdrove road course legends in this series, such as AJ Allmendinger, legendary drivers such as Shane Van Gisbergen. At 18 years old, we'll get into that more here in just a little bit. I mean, it was sensational. And then to save enough fuel on top of that to not have the victory taken away from him with all the insanity of the chaos in overtime. I mean, I can't really complain about the outcome here, but it frustrates me that it takes us so long to finish these races and leaves us with the potential for, the results to get shaken up a bit, and some drivers probably finishing higher than they would have otherwise, and other drivers who have great days and put in great drives that ultimately have nothing to show for it because they had to pit for fuel at the end, or they ran out of fuel at the end here. We saw that, I think, with Ty Gibbs on one of the restarts. So I completely understand the want and desire for a green flag finish. And I am willing to acknowledge I'm in the minority. I am willing to acknowledge that a lot of times we'll do this one attempt and we'll get the job done on the first attempt, and it'll be a great finish. And it'll be replayed for years to come. But it's always bothered me that we advertise a certain distance, we put these numbers in these race names, and then we throw it all out the window at the end because we want to try to maximize the entertainment value, and it wrecks all these strategies and everything. So I think once you get beyond one attempt, it's still a little bit too much for me. I'm still not a huge fan of that. But if you take the race numbers out of the names, get creative, go bowling at the Glen. That's got a nice ring to it. Bristol Night Race. I don't think it's that hard for tracks to come up with, race names like that. Yeah. I'll give you your one attempt, and we can leave it there. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. That's how the official iRacing official races operate in the 3 highest levels of NASCAR competition. On there, they have a green, white, checkered finish, and you get so many attempts on the official ones. And I think that works out fine because, trust me, if there was more, the iRating that I race around with, we would find ways to make more and more and more, and it would just go on forever. Yeah, I completely see that. One attempt is great. But yeah, one thing that also bothered me was the changes to the track in order to try to keep them out of the race groove. And it was a complete fail. I mean, it was supposed to upset the car to where they wouldn't want to be out beyond track limits. And I was thinking, great, this is going to be great. Then we get to the race though, and I mean, for the qualifying laps, they were still extending all the way out because I thought, well, okay, Well, it's only qualifying. They're not too worried about upsetting their car because they want to get the maximum amount of time cut on it. But no, we come to the race and it's still the same thing we saw last year. That only there's just rumble strips involved, or just the grooved payment, the grooved payment that you would see on like interstate, side of the interstate.
Yeah, you know what? That's what they should have done with all the grass they just dug up at Daytona and paved over. They should have just brought the grass over to Watkins Glen and given us natural track limits. If there's a natural deterrent, natural track limit, then the drivers won't go there. But if you pave it and they can carry that speed through the corner, what's the point of even having the rumble strips there or having the white line painted on the track? Whatever is supposed to define track limits. Clearly, track limits aren't enforced here, and that's fine. I think they're certainly over enforced in Formula One and series like that. But yeah, that certainly didn't work as intended there, did it?
Watkins Glen is a beautiful track, and it's one of the few left that are like that naturally built sort of tracks going with the terrain. And it hurts me every time I see them just completely ignore Watkins Glen and kind of make their own track by not using the limits. And yeah, they should put grass there. And look, Watkins Glen is the safest it's ever been. It used to be much dangerous, much more dangerous, and much less well kept. You just look back at any IMSA race in the 80s or 90s and see what kind of shape it was in then. But why can't we stick with track limits? No, there's no penalty for going out, but let's make it where it's grass, where you don't want to do it anyway.
One more point on this, and then we'll move on and give Zilic his flowers here because he certainly deserves it with both races that he was a part of this weekend. But Seth Eggert on X, when was this? I guess this was during the Xfinity race. The record for most overtimes in a single season is 29 combined across the three at NASCAR National Touring Series in 2023. For NASCAR Xfinity specifically, it's 14 in 2021. Thus far in 2024, we are combined at 26 this year. In the Xfinity Series, we're at 12. So those records were set within the last three seasons, and we are on pace to break both of them this season. So I guess what I take away from that tweet, and again, I was paraphrasing there. Maybe I'll link it in the description after I click this if people want to go check Seth's workout. And by the way, follow Seth on X/Twitter as well, because he's full of notes, nuggets, and stats like this. Great follow on social media if you're a race fan. My takeaway from that is that it's not just my imagination that this has become more of a problem in recent years. And again, I think that's part of a larger culture conversation that we've had in the sport many times over the last few years as well. But you see young drivers coming up through the ranks, and this is the reference point that they have. This is the recent history to them that is in their mind. And, they race very aggressively, and that's fine. But everything has a limit here. And the harder you race, the greater risk you run of going over that line and going over that limit and forcing us to try these overtime. I mean, my goodness here. You talk about what we're at 12 already. I don't know off the top of my head exactly how many races we've run so far this year, but I imagine we're in the early 20s. I mean, that's practically half the schedule so far. Half the races have gone into overtime.
Yeah, this just proves. Yeah, it proves to you that if you give drivers a leash for any kind of any more leeway, they're going to abuse the heck out of it. They're going to use all of it. And so, yeah, we're well on pace to break this record, Ben. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to set a record year. And I think I've heard Joshua Birch say this before when we've talked about overtime woes. When you get to this point in the race, if you're the one that causes the issue and the blame is on you, there should be some sort of, okay, end of the line. Like, do you want to police your drivers or not?
Well, Austin Dillon's still the winner of the Richmond race, so I think that answers your question there. He didn't get the playoff berth, but he was allowed to keep the win. So I mean, if you can get away with that these days, then I don't even know. I mean, incidental contact on an overtime, I don't know if there's any policing that. It was the 25th race of the year for Xfinity, by the way. So I forget now that we're in the middle of September. Watkins Glen's in the Cup Series playoffs. It's getting close to the Xfinity Series playoffs, but still, 12 out of 25 is as close to halfway as you can get without going over, right? So for all intents
Yes.
and purposes, basically half the NASCAR Xfinity races this year have gone into overtime. So
And that's sickening to me. It's like it's not there. You're just
yeah,
so and like it's and I'm sure this system was not intended. The overtime semantics were not intended to be used in this way this often this way. I'm sure when it was designed, they weren't thinking, oh boy, we're gonna have this every race and it's gonna be great. I think over time we've seen drivers become more accepting it as normal and overall just becoming more aggressive with the new rookie classes coming in. I think that might be more of the issue to look at.